Hey, fellow readers, welcome back to another episode of reading a book in every subgenre of every genre. My name is Elliot, and I'm on a journey. I want to read more books, and I'm using genres as a way to direct myself towards books that I might not pick up otherwise. And while I'm there, I'm looking for elements of the genre that I can apply to my own writing. So let's jump right into it. Today, we'll be exploring the genre of novelization, and the book representing that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Before we get started with the story, let's first talk about novelization. What is it? Well, novelization is when something is converted into a novel. This could be a film, this could be a TV show, this could be a video game. When something is originally in some other form and suddenly becomes a novel, that's a novelization. I was actually curious about the distinction between a novelization and adaptation. So I looked it up, and adaptation, like a film adaptation, when you think about it, is when something, like a novel, becomes a film. Then I looked up literary adaptation, and literary adaptation I thought would be maybe reverse, when film becomes a work of literature, like a novelization, but actually it still goes the other way. That's when a piece of literature, like a novel, short story, poem, becomes something else, like a movie, like a video game, like a play. So when you think about it, a novelization is like a literary adaptation backwards, but more specific to a novel. There. I hope that was as fun to try to comprehend as it was for me to say it all. So, a novelization book. I want to know why I should spend 8 hours reading this book when I could spend 2.5 hours watching the movie. I mean, I think it was closer to three. It was a really long movie. So, what value does this book have? I want to know, especially if it's written by the same guy who made the movie. I want to know, what can he add to it? So this is a novel. It reads like a novel, but there are those dialogue moments and present tense narrative and character description that makes it feel like you are reading a script. So I'm a Tarantino fan, and reading this book, I really do experience his dialogue in a much deeper way. I actually see how his words flow together. It's like going to a concert for an artist that you've listened to the recording of many, many times. It's so familiar, but it's kind of different. Another thing I like about this book is how it gets into the characters' heads. That's actually one of my favorite parts of reading novels, is actually being inside a character. You can't really do that in a script. A good script leaves room for interpretation for the actors to decide what's going on in the characters' heads. But I get it. Quentin Tarantino, he's the writer, director, and the novelist of this story. By even just doing the novel as an exercise, it probably helped him so much with the directing phase, just making sure that the actors' choices align with the whole story. You could really feel Tarantino flexing his movie knowledge in this book, which really works, especially at the beginning when Cliff is just kind of thinking about going to foreign movies on his own. That was really good, but I could see why that wouldn't work in the first 30 minutes of a movie. So one thing I found while reading this book is that movies have limitations. I mean, this was a great movie, Leo is a great actor, but the Rick Dalton character is just so much more pitiful in the book. I mean, when you're just looking at the screen and you're looking at Leo, and even when he's playing Rick Dalton and he's doing a great job and he puts on the fake mustache, you still see through that, and you still see Leo, and you know his career is not in the dumps. So, when reading this book, reading Rick Dalton, I could just free myself. I could try to not think about Leo. I mean, I'm thinking about Leo all the time, but I could just not think about him for a little bit, and I could actually get to the Rick Dalton level. I think that is a much more clean experience. A character that I just find so likable is Cliff. That's the Brad Pitt character. If he didn't kill his wife, he would be a pretty cool guy. And I feel like Tarantino went through a lot of effort to make him redeemable. But come on, he killed his wife. There's no coming back from that. Another character in this book is Charles Manson. There's actually a fair amount of backstory about him because that's something you don't get in the movie. You don't really know what he's doing, and it's a little confusing, especially for me because when I watched the movie, I didn't know that much about Charles Manson. So it was like, what is he doing here? Wait, what? A farm? This is confusing. But this book, it actually gives you a bit about the history and his musical aspiration, how he ended up in that LA neighborhood. Backstories are my favorite part of novelizations. I actually feel like that's what it's for, learning a little bit more about the character and the world. My favorite scene so far is probably the story of how Cliff got his dog Brandy, the pit bull. And let's just say if someone suggested entering my dog in a dog fight and then going and betting against my dog, I would kill that guy too. This novel is such an inspiration for any creatives thinking of repurposing their work, their IP, if you will. You could really feel Tarantino building out this world, and I really appreciate that. That's really cool. It's really impressive. I would say this LA movie world that he built, it's as complex as like Middle Earth or other fantasy worlds. However, I do feel like he went a little bit overboard in terms of the storytelling aspect of it. I appreciate character backstory. I appreciate real world history. It's when you start talking about a TV show, a fictional TV show, Lancer and Lancer characters, and just going on and on and on a bit. It just feels like Tarantino really built out this world and he just wants to share it. Anyways, I'm halfway through the book so far, and the strangest experience is that the climax in the movie happens in the first third of this book. At least it's revealed. I don't know what to expect in the second half. This is kind of exciting. Anyways, I'll let you know how I feel about all that when I finish, which is going to be right now. Alright, I just finished reading Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino, and here are my thoughts. I'm actually very curious to see like a modern day version of this book, you know, if it wasn't called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but just called Modern Events in Hollywood, just current events really, because so much has changed, but so much is still the same. And I think that's one thing Tarantino is trying to bring up in this book, is that we still have cults and we are still recovering from the whole Me Too thing, still trying to repair all that and not do more of that stuff. But we came from dark times, and as we continue to make progress and all that, it'd be interesting to see a current version of this with just following Timothy Chalamet around or something. I don't know. This book feels like both a series of deleted scenes and also the director's cut. But the director is a novelist, and it's a very strange experience. And if you're a fan of the movie, I definitely recommend you give this a shot because it's a whole nother level to the story. One thing I really liked about this book was that you see the parallels between the characters a little bit better. One example is between Bruce Lee and Charles Manson. They both wanted to be famous, but they went about it in different ways. Their different personalities kind of took over. And I think it was illustrated when Bruce Lee fought Cliff. I think it shows that Cliff, he had the killer instinct. He was a murderer. He was getting away with murder. He was not a good guy. Bruce Lee, yes, he might have been boastful. He might have been prideful, but he wasn't a murderer. He just wanted to show off. And it is in that not being evil and just wanting to put on a show that, you know, it kind of shows that that is maybe how you do. You don't need to kill people. Don't kill people is the answer to all your questions. Another disturbing parallel in this book is the interaction between Rick and Cliff and the underage girls. It's I would say it's more graphic than the movie for sure. Yes. I guess you could do that in a novel. No one gets hurt. But I saw all that as a nod to Roman Polanski's infamous story and probably many more that happened in Hollywood. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. However, it does bring into question of where to draw the line when you're working with a younger colleague. Is it all right you know, in the effort of making great art, is it all right for her to call you in the middle of the night to run lines? Is that okay? Where do we draw that line? If you're into Hollywood history, I think this is a good book to pick up because it's full of these little fun facts. I think they're facts. Quentin Tarantino kind of just shoves them into the story, and I actually think it adds a lot to it in terms of like a valuable, like interesting insight type of way. One of them being how Roman Polanski intentionally frames a shot badly because he knows that when it all comes together, the audience is going to be so encapsulated by the story that they'll actually lean over to try to see what they can't see in the frame. And I think it's that level of immersion that every artist should try to get to. I also really like the business side of this book and how, as an actor, you really have to work to navigate your career, picking the right roles for yourself. And it really allowed me to think that, yeah, it is true that oftentimes when you see a hero and a villain in a story, the villain is often played by a more established actor, and the hero is like this younger person who is still trying to figure themselves out. And it makes sense because the hero will always feel good about themselves, while the more senior bad guy actor can really work on their acting chops. A scene that I enjoyed more in the book than in the movie was the one where Sharon Tate goes and watches herself in the theater. I found that very relatable because I myself wouldn't I would hate to pay to watch myself in something I'm in, you know. I used to do background work and that is exactly how I feel. I've gotten paid to be a blurry thing in the background, and I just refuse to see that movie in the theaters because, come on, I don't want to be a part of that scam. The novel does a much better job than the movie in establishing Rick Dalton's character arc. He's so pitiful when he has to tell and then retell the story of how he lost the role to Steve McQueen and the whole world knowing. I think that transformation is actually what this whole story is about, and I'm really glad I got to experience it. And you really don't get that in the movie, which kind of sucks. I actually really enjoyed the scene at the end in the bar with the two main actors, Lancer and their entourage, and they're just kind of shooting the shit. And it's just Tarantino's dialogue is so good. I could have read the whole book of that. And they're just drinking cocktail, and it's so much fun. And I just miss going to the bar all the time. And yeah, that really brought me back. So that was really enjoyable for sure. I would say if you want to be entertained, go watch the movie because the movie is more entertaining. If you want to watch Tarantino's signature violence, you're not going to get much of it in this book. This book, however, has heart. This book is a love letter to cinema, and I feel like it's a romance both between the character of Rick and Cliff and also between an artist and their craft. I think if you're a filmmaker making original movies, you should really consider novelizing your work, but not just in the traditional way of just taking the story and then writing it down and then putting it on paper and then selling it, but actually going like another level. How do we tell the story in a different way, give more value, give a different experience to the people who already love the movie? And I think Tarantino does that here because boy, wouldn't I want to see like a Coen Brothers movie become a novel? That would be so cool. Like if Fargo was a novel written by like Joe and Ethan Coen, that would be really cool. Anyways, I'm Elliot, and this is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. I'm reading a book in every subgenre of every genre. If that is interesting to you, check out this playlist, and for more videos about writing and the creative process, don't forget to subscribe.